we all want the same thing. We want justice for Tyre Nichols. It's my hope that if there is any silver lining to be drawn from this very dark cloud, it's that perhaps this incident can open a broader conversation about the need for police reform.
We have, yet again, another black man who has died after a violent arrest by police officers. Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old man, died almost 3 weeks ago after Memphis police pulled him over and allegedly beat him for 3 straight minutes. The video of the assault, which attorneys for the Nichols family have likened to the 1991 Rodney King beating, will be released tomorrow night. Tragically, it isn't hard to imagine the patterns of police abuses, including unchecked brutality, that turn human beings into hashtags. But imagine a situation where everyone involved is black. The victim, along with the cops involved, as well as the police chief, who called the incident heinous, reckless, and inhumane. It's also a case where the response occurred the way it's supposed to, namely, efficiently. All 5 officers were fired last Friday, less than 2 weeks after the assault on Nichols. And today, those officers were indicted by a grand jury on charges ranging from second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, official misconduct, and official oppression for the death of Tyre Nichols. The Nichols family will hold a presser tomorrow. But here's one of their attorneys alongside Tyre's mother earlier this week.
He was a human pinata for those police officers. It was an unadulterated, unabashed, nonstop beating of this young boy for 3 minutes.
Oh, my God.
Joining me now is Paul Butler, MSNBC legal analyst and a former federal prosecutor. And Paul, we have done this a lot, very many times. These are the charges that these officers face: second-degree murder, official misconduct, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated assault, official oppression. The officers' names are Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III, Desmond Mills Jr., and Justin Smith. All of whom, if they were out of uniform, could easily be pulled over and be in Tyre's situation. What do you make of these officers and what they did to this young man and the speed of these charges?
So the officers are not charged with hate crimes or civil rights violations. So racial animus isn't anything that the prosecution has to prove. The Memphis Police Department is actually majority black, but citizens still have the same complaints about that department as they do other departments. In 2015, Memphis police officers took a man in custody and proceeded to beat him with paddles and chairs. And they were suspended without pay, but no criminal charges were brought. What's different today, Joy, is that there's literally a new sheriff in town. Memphis Police Chief Davis was appointed. She came in with a reform agenda inspired by the murder of George Floyd. So I think the movement for Black Lives and the activists that it created deserve much of the credit for why the chief and prosecutor acted so quickly in this case to try to bring these officers to justice.
Right. I mean, there's a sense from what you're saying that police culture seems to supersede race in a lot of situations. When police are allowed for decade after decade to operate with impunity, you get almost sort of a gang mentality. You can do whatever you want to whoever you want. It doesn't matter. There's no discipline involved. And the officers who do speak up, and I've talked to officers who have said this, that the one guy who decides to speak up is branded an outcast or a snitch. I mean, look what's happened, to some of the officers who've spoken about January 6th and how they're treated, by fellow officers. Is that what this is? Is this a culture problem that's bigger than necessarily just the race of the officers?
It's 100% a cultural problem. Old school policing lore says that if a guy tries to run when officers want to arrest him, he pays for it. Bad apple cops follow that principle, but that's not what the majority of hardworking, law-abiding officers do or should do. In this case, Mr. Nichols was beaten just 100 yards from his mother's house. He may have been trying to run there, and obviously he was right to be afraid of these officers.
Well, let me play Tyre's mom. She wasn't able to get through watching the whole video. Her name is Rovon Wells. Here's what she had to say.
I watched about a minute of it, but I couldn't. Once I heard my son say, "What did I do?" I lost it. And I didn't need to see a video to see what they did. I saw him in person where my son had lumps on his head and his neck was broke and his head was so swollen till it was starting to split open. That was enough for me to see as his mother.
President Biden issued a statement saying public trust is the foundation of public safety, and there are still too many places in America where the bonds of trust are frayed to broken. Tyree's death is a painful reminder that we must do more to ensure our criminal justice system lives up to the promise of fair and impartial justice, equal treatment, and dignity for all. I'm going to put on screen how quickly it took for officers in several cases, from Philando Castile to Jayland Walker to Breonna Taylor to George Floyd, to actually be fired. What can we learn from the way this case is being handled with these African-American officers? And all of the victims, of course, in these cases are Black.
So once again, the videotape makes a huge difference. I hate to think of what would have happened if this horrific act hadn't been caught on video. But we know that many people, especially Black and brown people, have complaints that police use excessive force, and typically those officers are not even disciplined, much less charged with crimes. And so when we look to how we can do better, there's some common sense police reform, including what was contained in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, that Congress has failed to act on. And I should be a little bit more specific than Congress. It's the Republicans in Congress who have stood in the way of passing legislation that would make a difference and prevent more tragic cases like this one.
And the money that they receive from the national police unions, et cetera, in many ways is one of the issues. And we can have a whole conversation about that. This young man left to photograph sunsets and skateboard. He had a 4-year-old. He had been working as a FedEx driver. This is a human being who should still be here.